morning we're talking about hospitality, which is an interesting one. There's a lot that could be said about it, but I've been told very clearly that I need to keep it brief, so I'm working on that. So, as a little encouragement to keep you going, we've got a little gift, because hospitality is about the blessings that we've been given and sharing them with others in a very practical way that maybe sometimes, often, involves food and drink. So I've got a little something to share. I was going to give you one each, but Tea and Toast team had taken more of them than I had thought. So I don't have enough for one each. But it serves as a good illustration, because hospitality is sharing what we've been given with those around us. And I'm now going to have lost you all as you get distracted in unwrapping and sharing the sugar. But maybe it'll keep you a little bit more interested and awake as I speak. Phil will get to you all, so don't worry. Hopefully there'll be enough. He won't forget. He'll make sure there's enough at the end so he gets one as well. So, hospitality. I grew up in a home that embodied hospitality. My dad, as well as marrying a vicar, my dad was also a vicar. And when we moved to a new church down in Guildford many, many years ago now, he took on the role of the rector there. And one of the first things that my parents did was they opened their home up to invite the whole of the congregation over for Sunday lunch. Not all in one go, various batches of 20 to 30 people at a time. They opened the doors, they fed them, they got to know one another. I'm now setting myself up, I realise, for an example of needing to invite the whole congregation for not Christmas lunch, Sunday lunch. And actually, the vicar before had never allowed anybody in the rectory. So this was quite a moment of the doors being opened and people flooded in. They were really fascinated to see what the house was like, because it was quite a unique and beautiful place. But as they came, they got lunch and they had time to make conversation and get to know one another. And from there, they had regular newcomers' lunches, often hosting 30 to 40 people at each time. We then had international students who often came and stayed with us for short periods of times. And then we had lodgers who came. We probably had we were trying to count up, 10 to 12 lodgers over the years. This was as I was a bit older, as a teenager. Some came for a few months, some stayed for 4 to 5 years and really settled in. Even to the point of one Easter holiday, I came back from university to find that my room had been given away to someone who was needing a room for a few months before they were about to get married. So I was squeezed into the little box room and had to get out of my room for a while. I've never let them forget that, and I still keep holding on to that. But out of those 10 to 12 lodgers, many of them have become like family. I was bridesmaid to 3 of them as they got married. They became a constant part of our lives, and deep friendships were formed, some of whom are now still my closest friends. And then my parents felt the Lord speaking to them about adoption. And my youngest brother came and joined us. He became part of our family, and he stayed. He started temporarily, but then stayed permanently, and has now been part of our family for many years, over 30 years. And again, we saw strangers become family in a very real way. A way that's impacted our lives over the years, sometimes for good, sometimes real blessing, sometimes friendships, people that you didn't know you needed in your life. Sometimes it's been difficult, sometimes it's messy, sometimes there's been struggle, and still today there are battles ongoing as a result of opening up our doors, opening up our lives, because people are complex. So it's not an easy thing to talk about. It's not an easy solution just to say, come on, let's open our doors, let's have people around. It's not as easy as that. Sometimes it gets tricky. But there is a clear call to live in a hospitable way all throughout the Bible. And by hospitality, I do mean opening up our doors if we have them, hosting people if we can. But I also mean opening up our lives. It does often come practically with food and drink, but it doesn't have to be something perfect, something amazing. Our home doesn't have to be a show home standard in order to do that. For those of you who may have been around a little bit longer, towards the beginning, you might remember we used to do something called host a roast or just some toast. And we encouraged the congregation to open up their homes, to invite people round. It could be a roast dinner, but actually if that was too much, toast is totally fine too. It's about spending time round a table with family, friends, strangers. Because when we open our doors, when we open up our lives, it creates space for transformation. And we see examples of this throughout the whole of the Bible. Back right at the beginning, Genesis 18, Abraham welcomes some strangers who turn out to be maybe angels, maybe the Lord, but he was hosting people unawares, but he welcomed them in. The New Testament encourages us to practice hospitality. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. We're repeatedly reminded to care for strangers and outsiders. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Jesus taught that serving is ultimately serving him. I was a stranger and you invited me in. Jesus identifies himself with those who are hungry, who are thirsty, who are lonely, who are in need. Jesus challenges us to extend hospitality beyond our friends and family. When you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Further on into the New Testament, it talks about Lydia opening up her home to Paul and his companions. It talks about Martha welcoming Jesus into her home. It talks about the early church who frequently gathered in homes and shared meals together. There is a call for each of us to open our doors, whatever that might look like. It might not be that you have a home, but maybe you can open your door in a different way. But to open our doors, open our lives. And this starts with us as a church congregation. It starts with one another, but it doesn't stop there. We're called to do both, to care for one another, to care for our church, but also to care for the stranger. Because open doors, open lives, create space for transformation. So we're going to look briefly at two examples of biblical hospitality. Luke chapter 7, first of all, which is a story of Jesus receiving hospitality at the home of a Pharisee who was one of the kind of religious elders, the religious leaders of the time. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is. She is a sinner." Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned towards the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." So there's so much that could be said about this passage, but we're only going to talk about it briefly in the sense of what it teaches us about hospitality. Simon invites Jesus into his home, but as we see the story progress, we see that there's a bit of a hidden agenda. He doesn't really want to learn from Jesus. He's not open to what Jesus has to show him. He's not really even that welcoming towards him. He's opened his door, maybe, but definitely not his life. And the comparison between his welcome of Jesus and the woman's is stark. He didn't offer any water. He gave no kiss or greeting. There was no oil for Jesus' head. All of those common, usual ways that they would show welcome, show care for one another in those days. He ignored those. He didn't think Jesus was worth it. He just wanted really maybe even to catch Jesus out, to show him up. There was no love in his heart towards Jesus. Whereas the woman deeply loved Jesus. She knew she had been forgiven, and she expressed it in a really clear way. Our love for Jesus should have an external expression. It should be visible in the way that we express ourselves in our worship to Jesus, but also in the way that we love one another. Do you know that I love Jesus through the way that I care for you? I'm not sure that's always that clear to see. As a church, we maybe can look like we're doing things well, and there's so much good that's going on. There is so much good to celebrate. But at times, is our welcome half-hearted? Are we really opening our lives up to one another? Is there space for vulnerability, for honesty? Do we have those conversations that go beyond the everyday, that dig a little deeper? Do we share our lives with one another? Because opening up our lives creates space for transformation. So we see in that story a little bit of the kind of failure of hospitality, of the ways that maybe it didn't quite work as it should have. But we're going to look very briefly at a second story in the Gospels, Luke 19, and the story of Zacchaeus. So I'll read this one. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he couldn't see the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He's gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Jesus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Salvation has come to this house today, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Zacchaeus, again, he's known in his town for being somebody that people didn't like. He was the chief tax collector, he was wealthy, he was a sinner, he was a traitor. He was despised by the people around him. But Jesus shows him something different, shows us something different. Jesus was willing to cross the boundaries, those lines that other people had set up, and reach out to people who maybe wouldn't be welcomed in otherwise. He saw the person. He saw Zacchaeus' heart, not just those labels of how he was viewed. He knew Zacchaeus' heart maybe even more than Zacchaeus did. I bet at the beginning of that day, Zacchaeus had no idea how much money he was about to give away. He may not have climbed that tree if he'd known, but Jesus saw and knew his potential. All he did was climb a tree. He had a bit of I want to know more. I want to see what this Jesus is all about. And he actually only climbed the tree because he was short. But the moment Jesus invites himself into Zacchaeus' life, he calls him by name and transformation happens. Open lives create space for transformation. That welcome, that inclusion, that reaching out to Zacchaeus by Jesus created space for him to respond. And he gladly does it. He willingly, over and above all expectations, jumps in. He's been welcomed, he's been loved, he's been seen, he's known. His name has been called out by Jesus. And the impact it has on him is transformational. Would we do the same? Do we do the same? Would we be able to welcome people, to open our lives, our homes to people maybe who've made mistakes, who have a different social status to us, different politics, different background? Does our love for Jesus push us outside of our comfort zones because we love the people that he loves? Hospitality, and the radical level of hospitality that the Bible calls us to, moves us towards the lonely, towards the stranger, towards the forgotten, towards those who make us uncomfortable. Jesus knew what Zacchaeus had done, but he didn't back away. Opening our lives creates space for transformation. Jesus doesn't wait for people to be acceptable to draw near. And then this grace that he shows brings repentance, brings a different way of living. And Jesus continues to extend that offer to all of us today. Zacchaeus in that moment, in that time, but the same offer is here for us today. That welcome, being called by name, being welcomed in. Maybe we feel a little bit like Zacchaeus. We're here, but we're hiding. We kind of want to see Jesus. We want to know a little bit more about what this faith stuff seems to be about. But maybe Jesus would disapprove of us. Maybe we wouldn't be welcomed. Maybe we wouldn't be wanted. Or maybe we've done things that mean we think we wouldn't be accepted. But as Jesus welcomed Zacchaeus, as he looked up at him and said, "I want to come to your house today, Zacchaeus," he says the same to us. I want to come into your life today. What's our response to that invitation? To Jesus stepping towards us? And if we talk about hospitality, it's not just about cooking a lovely meal and entertaining guests. We're talking about deep and radical hospitality, as we see from Jesus here, when we open our doors, when we open our lives to one another, it opens space for God to work. It creates opportunities for healing, for transformation on a far deeper level than we might ever realize. And I'm sure you've experienced some of that over time, people who've invited you into their homes. And I know, looking around, many of you who have invited me into your homes and have been so welcoming. And those moments when you get to sit round a table, to have those conversations, to share what's on our hearts, they're powerful. So my encouragement is that we create space for more of that, because life is so busy, so full, and the days go by, the weeks go by, and then we think, have we had any of those conversations that really get to the heart? There's more meaning in it. So my challenge is, how can we step towards that this week? How do we live a little bit more like Jesus did? Who is there that we maybe need to open up our lives to? Maybe within church, maybe outside of church. How can we make space for honesty, for a deeper depth of conversation, to move from just acquaintance to real community? And maybe there are people on the outside who maybe we don't even know yet, but are we open to welcoming them in? Are we open to strangers becoming family? Maybe somebody that we wouldn't automatically connect with, that we wouldn't easily invite in, but God wants to be at work in their life and in our life through that. Or maybe you want to respond to that invitation from Jesus for the first time. You've heard about him. You've seen some things. You've seen people say things about faith. And that invitation is for you. He is welcoming you in today. And maybe you're responding for the first time, but maybe it's the 100th time that you want to start again and you want to know more of what Jesus has for you and the transformation that he offers.